My name is Cassandra Wells. I'm 29 years old. 12 years ago, on Christmas Eve, my adoptive parents drove me to the airport with one suitcase and a one-way ticket to a country I'd never visited, to a family I didn't know existed. I was 17 years old. I was still wearing my Christmas pajamas, the ones with little snowflakes on them, because nobody told me to get dressed. My adoptive mother, Gloria Wells, sat in the front seat the entire drive without once turning around to look at me. When they pulled up to the departure terminal at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, my adoptive father, Kenneth Wells, got out, set my suitcase on the curb, and handed me an envelope. "There's an address inside," he said. "Your grandfather's people are expecting you." Then he got back in the car, and they drove away. I stood on that curb in the December cold, watching their taillights disappear into the evening traffic. Christmas music played through the airport's outdoor speakers. It felt like a bad joke. I was 17. I didn't speak a word of Portuguese. I had $40 in my pocket and a ticket to Lisbon. I built a new life completely from scratch. I taught myself the language. I worked two jobs while putting myself through university. I became a structural engineer. I bought my own apartment in Porto when I was 26 years old. I stopped crying about the past a long time ago. And then, 3 weeks ago, a lawyer called, and everything I thought I'd buried came flooding back. If this story connects with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Only if you genuinely want to stay until the end. And wherever you're watching from right now, drop a comment with your city and the time it is there. I'd love to know who's listening. Now, let me take you back to that phone call, the one that changed everything. It was a Wednesday morning. I was on a construction site in Porto, reviewing load-bearing plans for a new pedestrian bridge, when my phone rang. Unknown number, Portuguese area code I didn't recognize. "Miss Wells?" The voice was formal, careful. "My name is Enrique Carvalho. I am a probate attorney based in Lisbon. I'm calling regarding Augusto Ferreira, your maternal grandfather." My stomach dropped. "He passed away 11 days ago. He was 91. I couldn't find words. My adoptive parents had told me my biological grandfather died before I was born. They told me my mother's family was gone. They told me there was no one left, no one coming for me. They lied about all of it. "Miss Wells, you are his sole beneficiary. He has left you everything: his estate in the Douro Valley, the family cork processing business, his investment portfolio, and the property in Lisbon's Alfama district. Total valuation comes to approximately 18 million euros. The number didn't process. It couldn't be real. Your grandfather employed a private investigator for many years," Carvalho continued. "He tracked your life after you arrived in Portugal at 17. He knew where you were. He knew what you built." "He watched me?" "He watched you succeed for 12 years. He left a letter explaining his reasons." A pause. "But Miss Wells, there is a complication. Someone is contesting the will." "Who?" "Your adoptive parents, Kenneth and Gloria Wells." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor in Porto, staring at the wall as every memory I'd worked 12 years to bury came flooding back. Christmas Eve. I was 17. There was no tree that year, no decorations. After dinner, Gloria told me to come downstairs. Her coat was already on. My suitcase was sitting by the front door. "What's happening?" I asked. Kenneth handed me an envelope without making eye contact. Inside was a plane ticket. One way. Lisbon. "Your grandfather is there," Gloria said, looking at the wall above my head. "Your mother's people. You've never really belonged here, Cassandra. You've always known that." "I didn't know that." My voice came out small. "I don't know that." "The car's running," Kenneth said. I remember begging. I remember grabbing the sleeve of Gloria's coat, asking what I'd done wrong, what I could fix. "Please, please don't do this." She pulled her sleeve free. The drive to DFW was 45 minutes of complete silence. Gloria stared straight ahead. She never turned around, not once. Kenneth walked me to the curb, set down my suitcase, told me there was a contact name in the envelope and a hostel near the Lisbon airport paid for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Then he got back in the car and they pulled away without looking back. I stood in the December cold in my snowflake pajamas, listening to Oh Holy Night play through airport speakers, holding a suitcase in a country I'd never visited. And now, 12 years later, the people who had done that to me wanted 18 million euros for it. The legal documents arrived digitally the following morning. I read the claim twice because I was sure I was misunderstanding something. Kenneth and Gloria Wells, plaintiffs, versus the estate of Augusto Ferreira. Their argument was almost elegant in its audacity. They had raised me for 14 years, provided shelter, education, care. Under certain interpretations of American family law, they claimed a right to financial consideration tied to any inheritance received by a minor in their custody. They were asking for 40%, $7.2 million, for abandoning me at an airport in Christmas pajamas. I called my best friend and colleague, Renata Souza. She was over within the hour, scanning the documents with her jaw tight. They can't actually win this, can they? I asked. They're not trying to win, Renata said. They're trying to make you panic. They want you to pay them to disappear quietly. They're counting on you hating conflict more than you hate them. She was right. I hated conflict. I'd spent 12 years pretending these people didn't exist. How did they even know about this? I asked. I found out yesterday. Renata handed me her phone. It was a Facebook post from Gloria, a long emotional message about a daughter lost to estrangement, about family torn apart by greed and foreign lawyers. She'd tagged my old American account. The post had been shared 4,800 times overnight, and buried in the comments, someone had written, "Didn't she inherit millions from some European relative? These poor parents." Gloria had liked that comment. She'd set the stage before I even knew there was a play. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Cassie, baby." Gloria's voice came through thick with tears. "We need to talk." I should have hung up. I didn't. "Gloria, why are you filing a legal claim against me?" Filing a, honey, that's such a cold word. We're just trying to protect what's fair for our family. What family? You told me I was never really part of yours. You were so young, Cassandra. You misunderstood what we were doing. We were sending you to your roots. We thought it was what you needed. I was crying. I begged you not to leave. Children are dramatic. I'm not a child anymore, I said, and I am not misremembering anything. You're breaking my heart, Cassie, Gloria said. You broke mine first. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but underneath the shaking, something solid had formed. I'd spent 12 years rehearsing that conversation, and when it actually happened, I barely needed any of it. I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't owe them closure. I owed them nothing. 3 days later, Gloria called from a different number. I let her talk. I wanted to understand what I was up against. "Kenneth and I just want to meet in Lisbon," she said eventually. "No lawyers, just family. A real conversation." "Without lawyers?" I repeated. "Just the people who matter." I thought about what Renata had said. They're counting on you hating conflict more than you hate them. "That's not going to work for me," I said. "Why not? We're your parents. You can trust us." "You left me on an airport curb on Christmas Eve." Silence. Then Kenneth. "You're remembering that wrong." "Goodbye, Kenneth." I hung up. Then I called Attorney Carvalho. "They want to meet privately," I told him. "No lawyers." "Absolutely not." His response was immediate. "That is a pressure tactic. Do not meet with them privately under any circumstances." He paused. "But, Miss Wells, there's something else. I've been reviewing the original adoption records. Kenneth Wells worked in international finance in the early 2000s. He managed accounts for wealthy foreign nationals with American business interests. including a subsidiary connected to the Ferreira family cork business. The floor shifted under me. He knew about my grandfather before they adopted me? The timeline strongly suggests it. I cannot yet prove deliberate intent, but the connection is documented. Another pause. There is also a retired social worker in Texas, Dolores Fuentes. She handled your adoption originally. She contacted my office. She said she has information she's been carrying for 26 years. She used an interesting phrase. What phrase? She said she wanted to finally do right by you. That night, an email arrived from Dolores Fuentes. The subject line read, "I should have stopped this back then. I'm sorry I didn't." They showed up anyway. I was in Carvalho's Lisbon office reviewing documents when his assistant appeared at the door. "There are people in the lobby. They say they're your family. They're insisting." My blood went cold. "How many?" "3. 2 older adults and a younger woman." Carvalho shook his head clearly. "You don't have to do this." "I know, but I need to see their faces." We walked to the lobby together. Kenneth was in a pressed button-down, looking like he'd stepped off a cruise ship. Gloria was in a pale blue blouse, eyes already glistening, and beside them stood a young woman I barely recognized. Brianna, the girl they'd fostered 2 years after sending me away, the one who apparently stayed, who got the upstairs bedroom and the proper Christmases and everything I'd been disposed of to make room for. She was maybe 22, pretty, uncomfortable. "Cassandra!" Gloria rushed toward me with her arms open. I stepped back. "Don't." She froze, her face crumpled perfectly. "Baby, please." "I'm not your baby. I am not your daughter. I am not your anything." Kenneth put a hand on Gloria's shoulder and looked at me with patient disappointment, carefully calibrated. "There's no need for that tone. We flew across the Atlantic for a reasonable conversation. You flew across the Atlantic uninvited and showed up at my attorney's office." I looked at Brianna. "Why is she here?" Her voice was small. "They said you might want to meet me, that we could be like sisters." Something tightened in my chest. None of this was her fault. She'd been a child too. "This has nothing to do with you," I told her gently. "You don't need to be here." Gloria's tears picked up volume. She turned to Carvalho like he was an audience. "Do you see what she's become? We lost our daughter and she is completely cold." Carvalho looked at her with calm, professional neutrality. "Madame Wells, my client has asked you not to approach her. I strongly advise you to respect that." After they were escorted out, after Kenneth raised his voice and building security made their presence known, Carvalho closed his office door and set a folder on the desk. "I was going to wait," he said, "but you need to see this now." He spread the documents carefully. Adoption paperwork from 2001, standard forms, background checks, and then highlighted in pale yellow, one line in the family background section. Maternal grandfather, Augusto Ferreira, residing in Douro Valley, Portugal. Significant family assets, cork processing business, multiple properties, investment holdings. "They knew," I said. The words came out hollow, empty. "Before they signed the papers, they knew." "Yes," he pointed to a second document. "This is a note from the original caseworker. Miss Fuentes flagged the application because Kenneth Wells asked repeated, detailed questions about your biological family's financial status. She found it troubling, but the adoption was approved anyway." He paused. "Budget constraints. Overburdened system." I stared at the papers. 14 years of my life. 14 years of someone else's long-term investment plan. "Your grandfather tried to make contact when you were 9. He sent letters and gifts to the Wells household. Every single one was returned unopened. They told him you wanted no relationship with your Portuguese family. I didn't know he existed. He believed them for several years, until he hired investigators in 2014 and learned the truth. Carvalho's voice was quiet. He was afraid to approach you after that. He had already failed you once. He watched you build something remarkable on your own and was afraid appearing suddenly with money would feel like an intrusion. My throat closed. He left a letter, Carvalho said, to be read at any legal proceeding involving the estate. What does it say? The full truth, he said. Everything they tried to hide. That night, I read Dolores Fuentes' email 3 times. She had been the caseworker assigned to my adoption. She had flagged concerns about the Wellses' unusual interest in my biological family's financial status. Her supervisor told her she was overreading it. While packing her home office for retirement, she found a document she'd completely forgotten about. A memo Kenneth Wells had accidentally faxed to the agency instead of to his private attorney, dated November 28, 2001. In it, he had laid out what he called the long-term financial rationale for proceeding with the adoption. He had research on the Ferreira family's business valuation, estimates of my grandfather's net worth, and in his own handwriting, establishing legal parenthood over the Ferreira grandchild positions us favorably for any future inheritance event. Long-term proposition, asset base justifies sustained investment. November 28, 2001. 39 days before they brought me home. I sat in the dark for a long time after reading that. All those years I'd lain awake wondering what was wrong with me, what I could have changed, what I did to make them stop wanting me. The answer was nothing. There was never anything I could have done. It was never about me. It was only ever about money. I want to pause here for a moment. Have you ever met someone like Kenneth and Gloria Wells? Someone who performed love perfectly when it was convenient and discarded you the moment the math stopped working in their favor? Drop a comment and tell me. I genuinely want to know. And if you want to see what happened when all of this came out in front of witnesses, when they had to face every piece of evidence on the record, hit the like button so I know you're still with me. Now, back to the story. The Wellses requested an informal meeting before the formal mediation. Carvalho strongly advised against it. I agreed anyway, but on my terms. Public venue, my attorney present, Renata present, no private conversations. They chose a hotel restaurant in central Lisbon. When Renata and I arrived, I understood immediately why. 4 Americans were seated at adjacent tables at slightly suspicious angles, too well positioned to be accidental. Kenneth's people, an audience arranged to watch me be cold and unreasonable to my loving parents in public. Gloria spotted me first, eyes already shining, cream cardigan, soft and maternal. Kenneth got to business within 30 seconds. 35%. That's a genuine compromise. That's us meeting you more than halfway. 35% of something you're not entitled to. Of what we invested. His voice stayed smooth. 14 years of our lives. Do you know what it costs to raise a child? I wasn't aware parenting came with an invoice. Gloria made a wounded sound. We gave up so much. Kenneth turned down promotions. I restructured my entire life around you. I thought about the years I spent in the basement bedroom while Brianna's room upstairs had a bay window and a reading nook. Is that what you told yourselves? It's what happened, Kenneth said. Your grandfather never understood our situation. If we could sit down together without all the legal machinery, maybe we can explain that family should come before paperwork. One of the American men at a nearby table nodded approvingly. I looked at Kenneth, then Gloria, then the carefully arranged audience. You staged this, I said quietly. I wanted people to see who you truly are, Kenneth said. His smile didn't move. Fine. I stood up. Then let them watch. Gloria stood too. Her voice rose, pitched perfectly for the surrounding tables. Everyone needs to understand something. She pressed her hand to her chest. We rescued this girl. Her mother died penniless. Her family in Portugal couldn't have cared less about her. We opened our home. We gave her everything: stability, education, a future, and this is how she repays 14 years of love? The restaurant went quiet, heads turned. My mother was a school teacher, I said. She died in a road accident when I was 2. She was a good person who loved her family, and you knew nothing about her. That's what they told you, Gloria said. Her eyes glittered cold beneath the performance. Kenneth stepped in smoothly. Cassandra has always had difficulty with reality. We tried everything over the years. Patience, counseling, but some children, he shook his head with practiced sorrow. No matter what you give them, they simply cannot be reached. The Americans nearby murmured sympathetically. One woman actually patted Gloria's arm. I stood frozen. The lies were so large and so shameless that for 3 full seconds I couldn't form a response. There was simply too much to answer. Then a voice cut through from across the room. "Excuse me." An older Portuguese man had stood from a corner table, silver-haired, dignified, visibly angry. "I don't know who you are, but I have been sitting here for 20 minutes, and I want you to know that in this country, we do not speak about our children this way. Not in public, not to strangers, not ever." He sat back down. The restaurant stayed silent for a beat. I looked at Gloria, really looked, and saw it. The panic underneath the performance, the calculation cracking at the edges. "I'm done here," I said. "Cassandra, we can still. The next time we speak will be at the mediation hearing, and I will bring documentation that contradicts every single thing you just said." Kenneth's smile fractured. "What documentation?" "You should have been more careful about what you faxed to the wrong number." I walked out before either of them could respond. I made it around the corner before my legs stopped working properly. Renata caught my arm and guided me into the shade of a narrow side street. "They called my grandfather's family people who couldn't care less," I said. "He spent 30 years trying to reach me." "I know." Renata's hand was steady on my shoulder. "They're cornered. That's what cornered people look like. It looks like cruelty. Yes, it looks like people who know they're about to lose." The anger was building now, clean and focused, burning away the shock. "I want them to stand in a room," I said, "and hear every piece of evidence read aloud, in front of witnesses, on the record." Renata studied me. "Then that's exactly what we do." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Carvalho. We move the mediation up." The mediation was held in a formal hearing room in a Lisbon courthouse. High ceilings, tall, arched windows, the Portuguese coat of arms behind the mediator's bench. I arrived early with Renata. Carvalho sat beside me, his files in precise stacks. The Welleses came in 7 minutes late. Kenneth walked like he expected the room to rearrange around him. Gloria had fresh tears glistening. Their attorney carried an oversized briefcase with 2 hands. But I barely registered any of them, because sitting in the witness chairs behind our table was Dolores Fuentes, smaller than I'd imagined, late 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back simply, a navy blazer, sensible shoes. When our eyes met across the room, she nodded once, slow, certain. She had crossed an ocean, for me, for a case file she'd pulled from a box 26 years after the fact. The mediator entered, a woman in her early 60s, sharp-eyed, unhurried, Judge Perpetua Alves. She reviewed her notes without looking up. "Are all parties present?" "Present for the petitioners. Present for the respondent." Judge Alves set down her notes. "Mr. Wells, Mrs. Wells, before we proceed, I have one preliminary question." She looked up. "Prior to adopting Cassandra Wells, were you aware of the existence and financial standing of her biological grandfather, Augusto Ferreira?" The room went absolutely still. Kenneth's smile was ready and measured. "We had absolutely no knowledge of her biological family's financial—" "Thank you." Judge Alves made a note. "Counsel for respondent, present your evidence." Carvalho opened his folder. "Your Honor, I submit Exhibit A, a memorandum written by Kenneth Wells dated November 28, 2001, accidentally transmitted by fax to the adoption agency, where it remained in archived files for 26 years. He paused. Miss Dolores Fuentes, the original caseworker, is present to verify its authenticity. I watched Kenneth's hands. They went perfectly, completely still. Judge Alves read the document in silence. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened once. I will read the relevant passage aloud for the record. She cleared her throat. Ferreira family asset base is substantial and well documented. Cork processing business, multiple Douro Valley properties, Lisbon real estate, diversified investment portfolio. Establishing legal parenthood over the Ferreira grandchild positions us favorably for any future inheritance event. This is fundamentally a long-term financial proposition. Timeline uncertain, but asset base justifies sustained investment of time and resources. The room didn't make a sound. Gloria let out a soft, strangled gasp. That, that is taken completely out of context, she said. Her performance polish had slipped for the first time. Mrs. Wells, Judge Alves's voice was ice. You will remain silent until you are invited to respond. Your Honor, the Wells's attorney said quickly, this document was never disclosed in any prior proceeding. Because it was buried in agency archives for 26 years, Carvalho said, perfectly calm, until Miss Fuentes discovered it while preparing for retirement. Judge Alves looked at Dolores. Miss Fuentes, can you verify this document? Dolores stood. Her voice was clear and completely steady. Yes, Your Honor. I received this fax in November 2001. I noted my concerns to my supervisor. I was instructed to proceed with the adoption anyway. She paused. I have regretted that decision every year since. Carvalho withdrew a sealed envelope from his briefcase. Your Honor, one additional item. A letter written by Augusto Ferreira, included with his will. Per his explicit instructions, it is to be read aloud at any legal proceeding concerning the estate. Judge Alves nodded. Proceed. Carvalho broke the seal. My dear Cassandra, I stopped breathing. By the time you hear these words, I will be gone, but I need you to know the truth, all of it. I knew about you from the day you were born. Your mother, my daughter, Marisol, called me from the hospital in tears of joy. She sent photographs every few weeks. When she died in that accident, I was devastated beyond words. I tried to raise you myself, but I was 73 years old and living across an ocean, and the American authorities said a grandfather overseas could not be considered a suitable guardian. When the Wellses adopted you, I had hope. I wrote letters. I sent birthday gifts every year until you were 9. Every single one was returned unopened. They told me you wanted nothing to do with your Portuguese family. In 2014, Kenneth Wells wrote to me directly. He asked for a significant sum of money, claiming they needed financial support to continue providing for you. He implied without it, they would have to reconsider your placement. Kenneth's attorney slapped his hand on the table. Your Honor, this letter— Sit down, Judge Alves said, quietly. She didn't need to raise her voice. Carvalho continued reading. I refused to pay. I believed they were posturing. I thought no parent, even a conditional one, would actually abandon a child over money. 9 days later, they put you on a plane. You were 17 years old. You had nothing. I watched you arrive. I watched you find work. I watched you learn a language that was supposed to be yours. I watched you put yourself through university with no one's help. I watched you become an engineer, build a career, and buy your own home. I wanted so much to come to you. Every year I almost did, but you had built something so remarkable alone that I was afraid you would think I was appearing suddenly with money to offer, and that was all I was. I was wrong to stay silent. I should have found a way. I am sorry for every year I wasted. This inheritance is not a payment. It is not a debt. It is simply everything I have, given to the only person in this world I would want to have it. You were never abandoned by your real family. You were taken from us by people who saw a child and calculated a return on investment. I hope you find peace, Cassandra. I hope you find the family you always deserved. With all my love, Your grandfather, Augusto. The room was completely silent. Then Kenneth shoved back from the table. This is hearsay, he said, voice gone thin and high. A dead man's letter. His mental competency at 91? Mr. Wells. Judge Alvaz's voice cut across the room like a blade. Sit down. We raised her for 14 years. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, which I strongly suggest you exercise before you worsen your position significantly. Gloria was crying now, real tears, the kind that don't come from performance, but from watching something collapse completely around you. We did love her, she said. Her voice was stripped bare. Whatever else. You contacted my grandfather and demanded money, I said, very quietly. When he refused, you put me on a plane 9 days later. That is not love. That is not a mistake. That is a transaction that didn't pay out the way you planned. You don't understand. Kenneth's voice cracked. We were in debt. The market had... Kenneth, his attorney grabbed his arm. Stop talking. Right now. She owes us, Kenneth said, desperate, raw. 14 years. She owes us something. You owe me my childhood, I said. You owe me 14 Christmases. You owe me a grandfather I spent 12 years believing was dead. You owe me a lifetime of letters returned unopened. I stood up. But I'm not here to collect any of that. I'm here because you filed a legal claim. So let the law decide what you deserve. A quiet voice came from the back of the room. It's true. Everyone turned. Brianna had been sitting in the public gallery, silent, since the proceedings began. Her face was pale, but her voice when she used it did not waver. I heard them, years ago. I was maybe 13 or 14. They were arguing about money. Dad said, she swallowed. He said Cassandra had been a bad investment from the start, that they should have found a better angle sooner. Gloria's face went white. Brianna. I'm sorry, Brianna said, looking directly at me. I've known for years something was wrong. I didn't have words for it when I was young, and then I was scared. She paused. I'm not scared anymore. Judge Alves waited until the room was fully still. Then she folded her hands on the bench. She had not once throughout the entire proceeding looked at Kenneth or Gloria Wells with anything resembling sympathy. I've heard sufficient evidence. The claim brought by Kenneth and Gloria Wells is rejected in its entirety. Gloria made a sound I had never heard from her before. The evidence demonstrates clearly that the petitioners adopted Cassandra Wells with deliberate foreknowledge of her grandfather's assets and with documented intention to use their legal relationship with her as a mechanism for financial gain. When the primary strategy failed, they terminated parental responsibility and abandoned a minor child in a foreign country. She paused. This is not a family dispute. This is documented fraud. Kenneth's face had gone the color of old concrete. The petitioners will bear all legal costs for both parties. Furthermore, I am referring this case file to appropriate Portuguese and American authorities for investigation into adoption fraud, financial exploitation of a minor, and child abandonment. The words landed like stones dropped one by one on the floor. This mediation is concluded. She gathered her papers and looked at me. Miss Wells, you are the sole and rightful heir to Augusto Ferreira's estate. Your grandfather chose well. Then she was gone. Gloria rushed toward me before I'd taken a step. Cassandra, please, we can still... No. You're my mother. You were never my mother. I looked at her, at the woman who had stared straight ahead for a 45-minute drive to an airport while I cried in the back seat. I don't need your apology. I don't need your explanation. I need you to leave me alone, permanently, and never contact me again. You can't mean... I mean every word. I turned to Carvalho. We're finished here. I walked out of that courthouse with Renata beside me and 12 years of silence finally broken open behind me. Down the corridor, I could still hear Gloria crying. I didn't look back.
4 days after the mediation,
A journalist who had been in the courthouse that day filed a story in a regional Lisbon paper. American couple sues daughter for inheritance after abandoning her as a teenager. Within 3 days, it had crossed borders. International outlets ran their own versions. Parents who adopted child as long-term financial proposition attempt to claim her inheritance. Court reveals couple abandoned 17-year-old at airport after grandfather refused to pay them. Kenneth's LinkedIn disappeared overnight. Gloria's Facebook went dark. Someone found their membership at a Dallas private club and posted that they'd been asked to resign quietly. The comments were merciless. Thousands of strangers calling them exactly what they were. Part of me felt something like satisfaction. A larger part just felt tired. "They're getting what they deserve," Renata said when she saw my face. "I know," I said. "It just doesn't give me back anything." "No," she said honestly, "it doesn't. But the truth is out now. That matters." It did matter. I just didn't know yet how to feel about it mattering. A week later, Dolores Fuentes emailed me. "The Child Welfare Office in Texas has opened a formal review of the Wells adoption case. They're investigating whether fraud occurred during the original approval process. I've submitted all my documentation. This won't undo what happened to you, but maybe it prevents it from happening to someone else. I'm rooting for you. Dolores." I closed my laptop and walked out onto the small balcony of the Alfama apartment that was now, technically, mine. Below, Lisbon spread out in the evening light. Terracotta rooftops, white walls, the glint of the Tagus River in the distance. Somewhere in Texas, Kenneth and Gloria Wells were watching their reputation turn to ash. I felt nothing, and that, I realized, was its own kind of freedom. Gloria called one last time. Her voice was different, all performance stripped away, just cold, flat words. "I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed everything we spent 30 years building because you couldn't just be grateful." Grateful for what? For a home, for parents, for 14 years of our lives? I sat on the stone balcony wall. The evening was warm. "Gloria, you didn't give me a home. You gave me a basement room while Brianna had the upstairs with the bay window. You didn't give me parents. You gave me people who wrote down their return on investment projections before they signed my adoption papers." I paused. "And you didn't give me 14 years. You gave me 14 years of waiting for the moment I'd stop being worth keeping. I just didn't know what that moment would look like until it came." "You're going to end up alone," she said, cold and sharp. "No real family, no history, just money and strangers." "Maybe, but I'd rather be alone by choice than surrounded by people who only keep me when I'm profitable." Silence. "You were always difficult," she said, finally, "even as a child." "Goodbye, Gloria." I hung up, blocked her number, then Kenneth's. Then I sat in the warm Lisbon evening and felt something release in my chest, a weight I had carried so long and so quietly I had completely forgotten it was there. 3 weeks later, Brianna sent me a small package. Inside was an envelope of photographs. Me, as a child, 4 years old, 10, squinting into the sun in the backyard of the Plano house, grinning at whoever held the camera. The note read, "These belong to you. I'm sorry it took me so long to do the right thing. B." I held the photos for a long time. Then I put them somewhere safe. 6 months after the mediation, I moved into the Alfama apartment full-time. I still worked for my engineering firm, still called Renata on Sunday mornings to argue about football. But now I had somewhere with history, with my grandfather's books still on the shelves and his handwriting in the margins. I used part of the inheritance to establish a scholarship fund for young people aging out of the foster system in Portugal. I named it after my mother, the Marisol Ferreira Foundation. The rest I invested carefully, not because I needed 18 million euros, but because I wanted it to last, to mean something beyond a number on a statement. One afternoon, I took a train to a cemetery outside Lisbon I had never visited before. My mother's grave was simple: white stone, her name, her dates, and a line from a Fernando Pessoa poem. In the small stone vase, there were fresh flowers. My grandfather, I realized. For decades, even after he couldn't come himself, he had paid someone to bring flowers for his daughter. I sat on the grass in the morning light and talked to her for a long time about the life I'd built in the country that should have been mine from the beginning, about the grandfather I only found through his absence, about the future I was finally, carefully starting to believe in. I wish I'd known you, I said, but I am so proud to be your daughter. The wind moved through the cypress trees at the edge of the cemetery. I chose to believe she heard me. 1 year after the mediation, I wrote a short post on a personal blog. I wasn't trying to go viral, I just needed to say it once, clearly, on my own terms. A lot of people have asked about my story. Here is the honest version. I was adopted by people who had done their financial research first. I was abandoned at 17 when their plan didn't pay out. I spent 12 years building a life from nothing. Then my grandfather died and left me everything, and the people who abandoned me tried to take it. They failed. But this is not a revenge story. I don't hate Kenneth and Gloria Wells. Hating them would mean giving them space they don't deserve. They lost whatever power they had over me the moment I stopped letting their idea of family determine my worth. Here is what 12 years taught me. Family is not the people who chose you on paper. Family is the people who stay. Boundaries are not punishment. They are how you protect the life you built. And being alone on your own terms is infinitely better than being surrounded by people who only keep you when you're useful. You are not defined by the people who failed you. You are defined by what you chose to do after. Thank you for listening. The post was shared over 60,000 times. I stopped counting after that. A month later, Brianna sent me one more message. She had moved out. She was working, going to therapy, trying to understand the family she'd grown up inside. I know we're not really sisters, she wrote. I'm not asking you to pretend we are. I just wanted to say that I see you, what you built, what you survived. If there's ever room for a friendship someday, even a small one, I'd be grateful. B. I thought about it for several days. Then I wrote back. I'd like that. Take your time, so will I. But yes, C. Not forgiveness for what was done, not forgetting, just forward. And after everything, after the airport curb in Dallas and the Lisbon hostel and 12 years alone, and a grandfather I never got to meet, forward was finally enough. If there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this. You don't owe anyone your loyalty simply because they hold a title. Mother, father, family. Those are words. They only mean something when the actions behind them match. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is the most necessary thing you will ever do. And sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is simply refusing to disappear for someone else's convenience. If you've ever had to make that choice, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell me your story. And if this meant something to you tonight, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. There is another story linked in the description about a woman who reclaimed everything a family tried to take from her. I think you will want to see it. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. Take good care of yourself.